Hello everyone and welcome to this video. My name is Elian and I'm a P2P architect here at Barker's on the digital team. In this video, I'm going to be covering Coupa R42 release notes and highlighting all the key features that come with this release. In terms of the agenda, we'll be covering upgrades in procurement, invoicing, Coupa Pay and sourcing. And finally, like we did in our R41 webinar, I'll be giving you some tips and tricks on how you guys can prepare for a release. So to start, we're now going to look at all the procurement upgrades. The first feature is Catalog and Item Management Enhancements, and this feature is looking at managing your item availability in Coupa. The first key point to note is we can now add in-progress contracts to our items, whereas before this update, we'd have to wait for that contract to be published before we could attach it to the item. Secondly, we can now deactivate a supplier that you have items or catalogs with without those items being deleted from the system. And finally, we can now make a supplier item unpurchasable for all users. So you may have scenarios where suppliers are low on stock. We can prevent users from purchasing this item by making them unpurchasable and raising orders against them. Now to give you an idea of how this looks in the system, firstly, I want to show this catalog that we have set up for Lenovo. And here we can see we've got an item for the Lenovo monitor. I'm now going to show you how to make this unpurchasable for the user, and it's really simple to do. So if we go to items, and we search the item that you want to make unpurchasable. So here we're going to do the monitor. If we just edit that item and scroll right down to the bottom, and here we can see the tick, supplier item purchasable. If we deselect this and save that item, and now we go back to the catalog, you'll see that that item has now disappeared from that UI and the user won't be able to purchase this item. If you want to make it repurchasable, we simply just have to tick that box again. So it's really simple to do and manage. Now to show you what happens if we deactivate a supplier of a catalog. Here we're going to use Lenovo as an example again. So we've got the Lenovo supplier. If we go to edit the supply record, toggle the status to inactive, and select save, you'll see we're now prompted here. So it says, do we want to delete the items from this supplier? We're going to say no. And you'll see because we have deactivated the supplier, their catalog has now disappeared from the drop down. However, if we go to the items in setup, you can see that they're still available in Coupa. So if we go back to reactivate that supplier, that catalog will reappear again. So now to carry on with the other procurement updates, the next feature we're looking at is creating ad hoc shipping addresses. So here this upgrade is allowing users to create one-time shipping addresses using APIs for either their purchase orders, requisitions, or purchase order changes. So there may be scenarios where users don't need to use addresses from their company address book and they need to create that one-time shipping address. And this can now be done via API connections. The next feature is looking at background bulk edits for high volume requisitions. And this links into the update that we saw in R41, where that bulk editing tool had been upgraded to include more fields for the users to select. And this allows them to select multiple requisition lines at once and update them at the same time, which can save them a lot of time in that requisition process. This new feature is primarily looking at baskets with 100 or more lines, and when the user needs to update 9 lines or more at once. When this update is happening, it will occur in the background to prevent any timeouts from occurring and make sure all the relevant changes have been applied to those requisition lines. When the job is running, the requisition status will read bulk edit backgrounded, and once the job has been completed, the user will receive an email. So we're now going to look at the feature Move Requisition Lines to Streamlined Approvals. With this update, users can now go to the requisition line table and move lines to new or existing requisitions. The lines the users are moving must be in the status draft, pending buyer action, or pending approval, and the lines they're moving the requisition to must be in the status draft or pending buyer action. This can be extremely useful when users have raised several requisitions for the same supplier and they want to consolidate all their lines into one requisition, meaning they're only going to generate one purchase order for that supplier. In addition to this, it ensures that all the lines are going to be approved at the same time by the same approvers and means that the purchase orders are sent out quicker, streamlining that whole approval process. By default, you have the ability to move your own lines. However, admins can toggle a setting in company information called Enable Group Buy-in. This allows users to move lines from other users' requisitions and creating a group cart. All the users involved in this group cart will be able to configure and add lines as they need, and the approval flow will be based on the configuration of this basket. I'm now going to jump into the system to show you how this looks. To use this feature, we need to go to the requisition line table in Coupa. To find this, go to Requests, and then select the header requisition lines. And here you'll see in the top left of the table that we've got this move icon here. For this example, I've got two separate requisition lines, both with the same supplier, and I'd like to move one line into the other to generate a requisition with two requisition lines, so I only have to create one purchase order for this supplier. To do this, I'm going to select the button here, and now you can see this move icon is available. If I go to existing requisition and find 514, select that, and then we say move and view requisition. And here you can see Coupa is now generated as requisition with two of those lines consolidated together. If I edit this, I can now submit that for approval. So I'll jump back into the pack and just go over the last update for procurement, and this is going to be item access groups. So prior to this upgrade, item access was purely controlled by content groups on contracts. Whilst this would work well in most instances, there are some times that users or customers would require a more granular control over who could purchase specific supplier items. For instance, they may want a group of users to have access to a specific group of items from the supplier, whilst also restricting them from other items by the same supplier that fell under the same contract. Item access groups allow you to have this sort of control over items, and they're completely separate from the contracts, and they provide a much cleaner and simpler way to manage item access. How they work is you create an item access group and assign a content group to them. You then add the item access group to an item, and only users from the content groups will be able to purchase those items. I'll now jump into the system to show you how this works. So firstly, we need to set up these access groups. To do that, go to Setup, then search in Item Access Groups. You can see that I've already created one called IT Consumables. If you go to edit this group, the setup is very simple. All it needs is a name and a content group as well. Once these groups have been created, we can then assign them to items in the system. For this example, we're going to use Lenovo again, and we're now going to use the SwiftBook 3000. So if we go to edit this item and scroll down to the bottom of it, we can see that I've assigned the access group IT Consumables. If you have more in the system, we could add them here as well. I'm now going to jump in as a user who doesn't have access to the content group IT to show you how this looks. So we're going to act as James Andrews, who's a basic user and doesn't have that content group assigned to their user record. If we go into the catalog Lenovo, you can see that James can't see that monitor, but he does have access to all the other items that fall under the same contract. So that's going to be it for all the procurement upgrades. I'm now going to jump back into the pack to go over the invoicing updates. For invoicing, we do only have one feature, and that's going to be the approver's summary banner for invoices. How this feature works is when an approver has an invoice sat with them, there's going to be AI generated banner at the top of the invoice object, which is going to provide them with the concise and brief explanation as to why that invoice document is sat with them. This hopefully should help streamline that approval process. It's not going to be turned on by default. It does require the admin to go into the company information page and enable that setting. So now I'm going to cover the updates for Coupa Pay, and I'm going to kick off with arguably one of the biggest updates for this feature, and that's going to be the ability to edit supplier payment accounts. Prior to this upgrade, if there were any changes that needed to be made to these SPAs, users would have to deactivate the old ones and create a new one with those required changes. Now with this update, users with the roles Invoice Payment Admin or Virtual Card for PO Admin have the ability to go into the current supplier payment accounts and make the changes that they need. To edit the SPA, it must be active and internally created, and the fields available to be edited will depend on the payment type associated with that supplier payment account. This next update is only going to be relevant to those assigning authorities, but as you can see from the snapshot, that this update has enriched the privileged users pages. This is going to provide greater transparency by allowing you to see when and by who a user was last changed, and whether or not a user has multi-factor authentication enabled, and you can also see the privilege roles as well, just in that table view. This is going to provide those assigning authorities with a much greater visibility when they're assigning privilege permissions to users in the system. So now to finish off on the final update, and this is going to be that the source and event pages have been visually improved. Event pages will now dynamically adapt to different browser widths. An updated event header will contain the event name, revision dropdown with the event status, the user journey, and the event countdown, and this is going to appear in a grey box at the top of the source and event screen. Finally, there is going to be a sticky editing footer. So when editing the event, you can see action buttons in a sticky footer at the bottom of your page, and this is going to be available on all tabs during the event editing. I'm now going to jump into the system to show you what these updates look like. Now, I just want to go through some of the additional upgrades from this release. Two of the main ones. Firstly, we have CSP suppliers can now copy tax rates and references from one invoice line to all other invoice lines. This is going to save the suppliers a lot of time when they're dealing with multiple line invoices. And finally, users now have access to the recent activity in their Coupa mobile homepage. If you would like to see a full list of all these upgrades, then that will be available to you on Coupa Compass. If you have made it this far in the video, then thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least have learned something new. In terms of what we've got coming up, we've got a very exciting webinar on the 24th of June with our partners at Rossum, and these guys use AI to extract your data from business objects such as purchase orders and invoices. The system itself is fantastic, and the guys that work there are great, so I really recommend you tuning into that webinar. If you do have any questions on the content that you've seen today, please do not hesitate to get in contact with us. And once again, thank you very much for watching.